For today's player profile, we're going to be discussing Brandin Podziemski. Last season, as a rookie, Pods had one of the highest impacts on any given team in the league, leading the Warriors in plus-minus, drawing the most charges in the NBA. And as a rookie, being sent to the G League and playing himself out of that situation into the rotation and then as a starter was a trajectory that many fans didn't expect or foresee coming. But Pods has shown an ability to play with grit, hustle, intensity, focus, and takes both ends of the court seriously. So, year 2, we're going to find out what he's improved on and what he will focus on going forward to evolve and improve as a player. Last season, Pods played 74 games. In those games, he played 26.6 minutes per game, 9.2 points, 5.8 rebounds, 3.7 assists, 0.8 steals on 45.4% from the field and 38.5% from three. So right off the bat, you see Pods very durable, played 74 games out of 82, played a lot of minutes, especially for a rookie. Like I said before, sent down to the G League, played himself out of that situation into a starting role eventually. And his minutes and role did fluctuate a little bit. He was coming off the bench at some point during the season, then eventually started, then was sent back to the bench. So regardless of the position he was put in, he still delivered and played at a high level all around. He's not a one-trick pony. He's a jack of all trades. And you see right in terms of his production points per game, 9 points is a lot. A lot of rookies don't really get the opportunity, especially on the Warriors, that he did in terms of playing time and in terms of possessions. So he handled the ball a lot last year and made the most of the opportunity he had. The 5.8 rebound stands out because at 6'4", him being a guard, able to inhale rebounds and crash the boards, crash the glass relentlessly at his size and frame is something that stood out. And we're going to continue to see that and discuss in what ways he can continue his trajectory as one of the elite rebounders in the NBA. 3.7 assists, obviously. Playmaking was a big part of his contributions last year, making teammates' job easier, taking the ball handling load off of Steph, the playmaking on the ball, sharing that responsibility with Chris Paul in particular. But I think it'll be interesting to see what Pods can do this season in terms of taking a step as an overall playmaker. 45 from the field, 38.5 from three. His efficiency overall was pretty average. It wasn't anything that stood out, although his three-point percentage was very good. From the field, didn't shoot that well. He was, pretty much league average. There were times where he, was more efficient against particular matchups, times where he was struggling against length and size against other matchups. So it really just depends in terms of how easily Pods can get his game off on the matchup. But his three-point percentage was relatively consistent throughout, even though his overall volume was not necessarily as high as you would think, or as you'd like it to be. Now, in terms of his strengths, came into the league as a crafty ball handler. His ability as a shot creator, taking bigs one-on-one to the rim, and attacking mismatches. He showed the ability in isolation to really score at an efficient level. Last year, he shot 55.4 effective field goal percentage in isolation possessions. Now, obviously, the sample size is not going to be as high as other players on the roster and across the league. But even in that restricted sample, I still think he proved to be very competent and capable of attacking his man. And he showed flashes of getting to the basket, going at mismatches that are on the perimeter, taking step-back threes, or getting to his mid-range floater area. So Pods has, some on-ball ability, whether it's as a shot creator or as a playmaker. But specifically, handling the basketball is something that Pods is very comfortable with, and he's been doing that his entire basketball life. So I expect that to continue next season to an even greater degree. Changing speeds to gain advantages. This is something that Pods showed a lot of flash and a lot of potential for. his deceleration, the ability to change movements on a dime and be shifty laterally. He showed the ability to get to different spots on the floor, especially around the basket, and a proficiency to use his craftiness, his footwork. He has very deft footwork, the ability to, you know, position himself for up and unders, to duck under defenders that may be stationary, uh, turnarounds, those types of looks. We've seen him take a variety of shots when he's a little bit, stuck and doesn't have much to go, and in terms of space. So I think with Pods, we've seen his ability to get to certain areas on the court and then improvise based on this given situation. It's quite advanced. And again, the footwork, the deceleration, the ability to use his shiftiness and his frame to get to different areas and to be effective is something that we're going to continue to see him grow in. But he already has a very high floor in terms of that. And like I said, attacking mismatches, we've seen him post up smaller guards, back them down, get to spots within the paint, and finish. So he's shown the ability to attack smaller players and slower players, such as even Giannis, taking step back threes over him, getting to that pound dribble isolation where he can, get to different spots on the floor where he's comfortable. And like I said, he's just a very shrewd player. He understands spacing well. He can play on and off the ball. He's an off dribble playmaker, someone that can, with the ball in their hands, attack to the basket, spot up in the corner. He does a very good job of relocating and spacing out. He's a very good cutter as well. He showed the ability to read the offense and react in accordance with this overall spacing. There have been a few back cuts and baseline cuts that he showed throughout the year where he understood how the defense is bending and how he can take full advantage of the space and the lanes that are created as a result. So Pods has a very, very keen understanding of how to play within the flow of the offense, not taking away from anyone, being a cog in the machine, and understanding how to fit in very, very efficiently. Off the ball, on the ball, as a scorer, as a playmaker, he has a very well rounded game offensively. He doesn't do anything particularly exceptional from that standpoint, although I do think his craftiness is more advanced than players around his age. But overall, like the ability to use his body, use his shiftiness, the right to left movements, the craftiness off the bounce, using his step backs, his footwork, his quick trigger, all that stuff. That gives him an advantage inherently, especially against a lot of matchups in the NBA who may be smaller, weaker guards that he can take advantage of, or slower bigs who switch out. Even though Pods may not beat them with his quickness, he can take advantage with his shot making and with his ability to use hesitation moves and tap into a deep array, a deep bag of crafty counters. His counters are actually more advanced than even some third or fourth year players. As a guard, the biggest thing that stood out to me was him being an elite rebounder. Very few guards in the league average over 5 rebounds a game, and he averaged almost 6. Didn't play near 30 minutes. He was around 25 minutes. And so the fact that he was as proficient a rebounder as he is at the position that he plays is something that stood out and something that we have to look at moving forward in terms of his combo ability at the 1 and the 2, because he plays bigger than his size. At 6'4", and the frame that he has, he may not be, the traditional shooting guard size, but ultimately he plays with effort, technique, and instincts when it comes to rebounding, using box outs by his teammates, checking his man well. He has an innate understanding of angles, knows how to best position himself for rebounds. He has a very good nose for the ball. So Pods' instincts in terms of rebounding and his understanding of technique, using the box outs that his teammates apply and taking advantage of that. Also, playing with physicality and not being afraid of rebounding amongst the trees. That's a very underrated aspect of his game is the hustle, the intangibles, the fearlessness that he plays with. Willing to get his hands dirty and get into the mix, even against players that are bigger and stronger than him. So his nose for the ball is something that really stood out last season from a rebounding standpoint, in terms of diving for loose balls, hustle, and like I said, he has a very advanced and nuanced understanding of how to position himself, how to put himself uh, in terms of angles to set himself up for rebounds, using his teammates' positioning as well. That's something that cannot go under the radar. In addition, he impacts winning at a high level. Even though this is not something that you would necessarily see on a stat sheet, you're not going to see connective passing, for example. But that is something Pods does very well. He passes, understands the flow of the game, attacking closeouts, has a willingness to move the ball and create for his teammates, making quick decisions. So he's a very willing passer. He moves the ball well. Um, doesn't always look to score when he's attacking closeouts or driving into the paint. He plays with a lot of pace, and his court vision is actually very, very good. He can see the floor. He sees cutters. He sees shooters, and he's able to read what is going on and understands how to space um, in order to take full advantage of that. So his quick decision making is incredibly important in the point five basketball style that Steve Kerr likes to run. The system that we implement in terms of the read and react and the motion offense, you need to have players that are comfortable making those decisions. And again, attacking closeouts, having an understanding of the way the game is flowing, the pace, those are things that Pods does a really good job at. And he has a good feel for the game. His feel, his instincts, those are really, really good and really, really high for a player as young as he is at 21 years old. Again, the connective passing also from a short roll standpoint, from a intermediate standpoint in terms of kickouts, drive and kick opportunities, transition, lobs. Those are things that are very underrated in terms of a point guard, because a lot of point guards can make the initial reads, but making those secondary and tertiary reads is a unique position to be in, because that's primarily what front court players do. You see Draymond does it, Kyle Anderson can do it, but Pods can be used as a secondary playmaker, or even tertiary, where he's off the ball and stampeding the catch, attacking a closeout, and then driving kicking. So he has the ability to be very dynamic in this offense, and that's something that we can't take for granted. He also had the highest plus minus of any Warrior last season, which again speaks to his ability to impact winning at a high level. He was a plus 264 in 74 games played. So he played a lot of games, but was a major positive in all of those games. And to lead this team in plus minus when you have Steph Curry and Draymond Green on it is speaks volumes to his impact and to his commitment to doing the little things. He plays with a lot of toughness. He's very competitive, and he wants to win, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to win. His off-ball defensive awareness is something that also stood out. His anticipatory style, the ability to be at the right place at the right time, leading the league with 38 charges drawn. All of these things add up and they culminate to being one of the most high impact role players in the NBA. So you cannot underestimate Pods' ability to put his imprint on the game and be at the right place at the right time, whether it's offensively or defensively. But specifically defensively, that's a very underrated aspect. His rotations, closing out on shooters, getting to the right switch, peel switching, uh, all of these things, staying connected on a string. Pods doesn't really create many breakdowns off the ball from a defensive standpoint. In fact, he cleans up a lot of mistakes. He's willing to, close out on a shooter that's already open, or recover on uh, another, man's offensive player to help defensively. He does all of the little things to help connect and keep the defensive unit intact. And the 38 charges just speaks volumes to his anticipatory ability to get to spots, beat his man to their spot, or even off the ball, sliding in for a charge and anticipating the drive. So Pods' ability to make an impact in a multitude of ways is something that stood out as well. And then finally, his 3-point shooting. Like I said, his shot is something that, has looked really good. Last season, he shot above average, even though the attempts weren't that high. He shot 38.5% from three on 3.2 attempts, which is really good for a rookie, for someone that was not expected to get a lot of playing time, sent to the G League, had as broken an opportunity in rotation as he was, to take advantage of that and to still produce very efficiently shooting the ball. It goes to show you that he doesn't really need a lot of rhythm, and he's just a natural jump shooter, especially from deep. And he has a quick trigger, creates good space. We've seen him with the jab steps, using that to leverage spacing, creating a gap, some separation between him and his man. We saw him do that against Dame, against Giannis, against when we played the Bucks, back in I believe February. So he showed a very keen ability to, again, use subtle moves, very advanced, but basic moves at the same time, because you have to have an understanding of space, distance, angles in order to get your shot off effectively. And it's not that Pods does a lot to do or to generate that type of quality look, but it's more that he knows exactly how to position himself in order to execute effectively. So the entire strength of Pods, when you look at his ability to create his own shot, make plays for others, and play within the flow of the offense, a lot of it hinges on his feel for the game. And that's why when you watch him on switches, able to use jab steps, relocating to space, different cutting actions, flashing to the top of the key or the wing, all of these things help the flow. And that's why he was so effective next to Steph, is because he complements Steph's movement style very well, whether it's in transition or in the half court. And getting his shot off, he doesn't have to do much to do that. Doesn't need an array of moves, doesn't need a particularly advanced handle, doesn't really dribble the ball to get his shots off. It's more craftiness, footwork, and one or two moves and counters to get to those spots and to hit those shots efficiently. Shot 58% on step back threes. That was one of the more impressive stats when breaking Pods down and what he's able to do. Those step back threes, again, a simple yet effective move, a basic yet advanced move. Because while you're only making, a single movement in terms of the step back, it's the front foot into the back foot to create that separation between you and your man. His ability to understand distance and when the defense is giving him that shot to take full advantage of it is something that we don't see a lot of young players develop until later on in their career. Even some of the more advanced shooting guards we've seen in the league, Devin Booker, Jaylen Brown, their step backs were not necessarily within the flow of their game coming into the NBA. That's something they had to work on. That's something that they had to develop and they had to improve at over time. And so for Pods to be as efficient as he is in terms of stepping back, knocking shots down, the confidence to not only take those shots, but to do it at a high level against some of the best defenders in the league that we saw, some matchups that have length, deep in the shot clock. And that's an area of Pods' game that's very underrated, is in a pinch, he can get a shot off. He's not someone that might get stuck with the ball, and that's incapable of producing offense when the shot clock's winding down. He's able to, even if it's not the highest quality look, he can still get a shot up and break the defense down in a variety of ways. So the step back threes, and then on top of that, he's very effective off the catch and shoot. We watched Pods last year play a lot off the ball. His ability to space out to the corners, spot up, fill in the lanes on the wing in transition. Those are two things in particular that I think we can benefit from. Pods spotting up in the corner off the ball in the half court, and then in transition, filling the lanes at the wing. Because if you remember, I mean, there are plenty of shots that, granted, he missed, but remember that shot against the Lakers where in transition, in double overtime, he's coming down the court, catch and shoot opportunity on the wing. That ability to fill that space and to understand where he can take full advantage of a recovering and transition defense is really good. Now, taking that shot in that moment, not so much, but the fact that he has a feel for the game in terms of how to execute in transition is a very good sign. And that's something that we can continue to take advantage of. And once he figures out how to, control the pace of a game, manage the clock, take care of possessions, all of these nuances to being a point guard running an offense, being effective in a variety of ways, that is when he'll take that next step. But for now, just kind of operating on feel and an understanding of flow, Pods just understands like how to play off of other players, right? Steph's movement, Wiggins' athleticism, Draymond's passing. He understands what each player does well, what their skill set is, and then how he can fit in, what he can excel at, and how he can contribute in accordance to complementing the system. So step back threes are a beauty, but it's even better when you have someone that can fill the gaps when possessions are breaking down, off the ball specifically, especially in transition. And he also has showed range beyond the three-point line, especially in Summer League and last season towards the end. We saw Pods not afraid to take a 30-footer or a 29-footer, especially when he's given the room. He is more than willing to take those types of shots, and with confidence, might I add. So Pods' ability to not only just take set threes and catch and shoot threes, but also pull-ups is huge. And that's something that we saw him in Summer League really take a step in. That's an area that he particularly focused on and advancing at, is taking those pull-up threes off of screens, working on dribble handoffs, and if the defender is giving him room and too much space, not afraid to take that shot, even if it's from 2 or 3 feet further out from the three-point line. So Pods' range is another thing that we have to look out for and something to kind of pay attention to during the season, because he's not afraid to let it fly. And again, the more skilled and the more proficient he becomes as a shooter, the volume is going to go up and the degree of difficulty might go up, but that comes with being an efficient shooter. Now, as far as weaknesses goes, he's an overall inefficient scorer. Last season, he shot 45% from the field, which isn't terrible, but if you look at the deeper numbers, he shot 54% true shooting last year. That's 172 out of 193 qualified players. So he was one of the lesser efficient players in the NBA in terms of the general volume that he shot the ball with. That is a concern. And again, as a rookie, it makes sense because his minutes were yo-yoed. He was starting. He was coming off the bench. He was sent to the G League. There was very little consistency in his season, and yet he still produced at a very high level overall. But as a scorer, there's definitely still leaps and steps that he must take in order to be more effective. And his efficiency definitely stood out at 54% true shooting because that is below league average. So while his field goal percentage was around league average, give or take, his overall efficiency was below, and that's partly due to being a poor free throw shooter. Part of scoring is hitting your free throws, and he is an inefficient free throw shooter. He's subpar. He needs to work on that, and that's something that his dad mentioned he worked on this offseason, is working on his free throws, becoming more reliable at the line, and when teams foul you and when you're able to get to the basket at will, not afraid to take free throws, that's very important. You have to be reliable there, especially if you want to close games. You can't be someone that defenses are more than happy to foul down the stretch of a close game for free throws. So Pods needs to be more reliable at the line. And last season shot 63%, which is unacceptable, especially for a guard. This offseason, he's worked on that. So let's see if he can take a step in that category, because it's going to be absolutely essential that he hits his free throws, especially if he's going to be playing over 25 minutes a game. And if he's going to be starting or closing situations, you have to have someone that you can rely on at the charity stripe. But like I said, overall efficiency, true shooting, not high enough. He needs to bump that up. Now, let's break down exactly why. His shot selection, for one. He passed up threes in favor of tougher shots at the rim. There were many times, and Pods even acknowledged this himself earlier this offseason, that he rewatched film. He's a student of the game, and he studied exactly possessions and opportunities that he passed up on, that he missed, in order to take these open shots, whether it's at the wing or on the corner. And these types of shots were available, and he decided to pass up on them for less efficient shots. We're talking about tough turnarounds, floaters, and hook shots. Those shots are inherently less effective, especially at his frame, the lack of athleticism that he plays with, and a league that, rim protection is very rampant. When you look at the Timberwolves, when you look at the Thunder, and a bunch of these teams of the sort, you can't be passing up open shots for tougher ones. And that's something that Pods acknowledged and understands he has to correct going into next season. Taking the open threes when they're presented and shooting them with confidence, not being afraid to get 7 or 8 up a game, that's critical. So that's one area. And then, again, he wasn't able to create space and blow by defenders. Pods, great shot creator for his youth and for how experienced he is at this point, but he's not someone that's going to be shifty with his handle. He's not going to break you down with advanced moves, taking step back threes off a crossover or snatchbacks. That's not part of his game. His dribble counters are more limited than a traditional guard. Because of that, he has a lack of burst off the dribble, right? And he found himself stranded at the nail, cut off on baseline drives. There were times where Pods found himself stuck in the middle of no man's land without much moves, without much mobility to counter from. And that's where his footwork came in, which is a positive, but the negative is the possession dies out and you result in an inefficient shot or the shot clock winding down and not getting a shot off at all. So Pods needs to work on being more effective in those situations, understanding how to navigate the in-between game. And that's another area that he acknowledged that he is going to focus in on, navigating that in-between game, the mid-range, the floater area, taking higher quality shots, taking the floaters and hook shots out of his game, and taking more mid-range shots in the paint. That is something he specifically said, and it is absolutely critical that he does that. He also needs to improve on his finishing. Last season, he was a below-average finisher. Finishing is absolutely essential for guards in today's game because teams will funnel guards to rim protection, and if guards can't make those centers pay, then they're relegated to the three-point line, and then their value essentially hinges on their ability to hit shots. So for Pods to be more dynamic and reliable as an offensive player, the whole package, you want him to not only be efficient at the three-point line, but also effective on drives, whether it's taking floaters, whether it's a variety of finishes with either hand off the glass. And that's another area that I think we saw in Summer League. He was finishing above the rim, driving really hard into the paint. He was trying all different types of finish artistry, using the glass, reverse, all types of different counters at the basket. And it looks like he also expanded on his finishing package and his overall craft at the rim, which is important. His craft at the basket needs to be more advanced than it is. And for him to take a full step offensively, he's going to have to address that. As I mentioned earlier, adding jump shots in the paint and the mid-range, that's absolutely critical. Pods last season didn't take a lot of mid-range shots, and when he did, he was inefficient. For Pods to effectively be on the court, when you have Steph moving off the ball on the perimeter, relocating, he needs to take full advantage of that space, and there will be plenty of it in the mid-range. So taking those shots and being efficient at them is absolutely essential. We saw Jordan Poole take those looks, Chris Paul take those looks over the last couple of years. Those pull-up mid-range, at the elbow, at the nail, at the floater area, those are going to be presented, and he needs to take full advantage of them. And then a tendency to have tunnel vision. That's something that I think the entire fan base pointed out last season. Is there were times that Pods pounded the ball too much, and he found himself stuck or in no man's land, as I said earlier, dribbling the ball out, winding the shot clock down without much generated quality space or look. And that is why Pods needs to be more mindful when he's in transition, when he's in the half court, what he's creating, what is the primary and secondary action going on right at that moment. Because there were times last year where he was pounding the ball without much purpose, and he wasn't really getting anywhere in terms of creation for himself or for his teammates. So he needs to work on scanning the floor, surveying, and seeing what the spacing looks like, who is out there, and what the formation, what the geometry is in terms of positioning. Is there a lob threat? Are there shooters coming off of screens? So keeping his head up and actually paying attention and using his court vision more often is something that he can benefit from. And like I said, improving off-ball movement, cutting more, moving and going, right? Give and go. There's different things Pods can incorporate off the ball to be more effective as an offensive player and play more point 5 basketball, play more of that read and react style in the system. There are things that Pods still needs to work on as an overall player in order to be a better fit, because as great as he is, he still has flaws. I would look at studying an Andre Iguodala or Sean Livingston. When shots weren't presented to them, they kept the ball moving and they moved and they respaced. That is something Pods needs to get into a habit of. If the shot isn't presented or if a pass is not presented, then find someone, make a play, and respace. Because there were times where in a 24-second shot clock, 14 seconds were spent with him dribbling, which is an issue. Furthermore, his on-ball defense. Part of why his on-ball defense is a weakness is due to his athletic profile. His height and wingspan are not ideal. He struggles to get meaningful contests against jumpers. We've seen him guard the likes of Devin Booker and struggle to even get to near the release point of Book. Obviously, Booker is an elite scorer. He's one of the best in the NBA, and to ask anyone to guard him is a tall task. But for Pods in particular, he does have a plus 0.5 wingspan, plus 0.5 inches. At 6'4", 6'5", to have a 6'5.5" wingspan, barely greater than his height, is something that is a limitation physically. He doesn't have length. He doesn't have the ability to really bother shots at the peak, and that's an area that he needs to work on. In terms of positioning, he can't change his wingspan, but he can change how he positions himself to generate better contests, to generate better defensive possessions. And so, while again, Pods can't control what he can and can't do physically, what he's capable of, he can ultimately use the same craft he uses on the offensive end and apply that defensively. Understanding spacing, positioning, angles, and becoming a very proficient defender, no matter the matchup. Because against higher level matchups, such as I mentioned, Devin Booker, Anthony Edwards, athletes or players that can get to their spots and rise up over the top, Pods definitely did not show the ability to bother them at all. They shot right over him like he was a chair. And to no fault of his own, that is something he needs to work on and find ways around to stay on the court if he wants to be a starter or a closer, because it is a part of his weakness, a part of his overall weaknesses. And he's also undersized for his position. At the 2 guard, a lot of them are around 6'7", 6'6", 6'7". Pods is around 6'4", 6'5". So for his own position, he is undersized. As stocky a build as he has, and he has a very sturdy frame, he's definitely strong, but he's not, from a height and length standpoint, he doesn't really match up well against traditional shooting guards. From a point guard standpoint, he's definitely on the bigger side of point guard. So depends how you view him as a combo guard overall. That is how I view him. He is the player that can play on and off the ball as a combo. But if you view him as a shooting guard, he's definitely undersized comparatively. And then staying in front of quicker, more athletic players. This is something that we've seen him struggle with. Nobody in here trusts him to guard a Ja Morant or some of the quicker, more shifty players in the league that can, with the first step, blow by you for a layup, get to the basket with that quick dribble burst. That's something that he's just not nearly advanced enough to take on at this stage of his career. So Pods, again, as great of a defender as he was last season, all things considered, he was a positive, and he led the league in charges, led the team in plus minus, showed a very keen ability for off-ball awareness. His on-ball defense was better than expected, but still not good enough. All things taken into consideration, he does have limitations you can't look past. And from an athleticism standpoint, keeping him in front of some of the quicker, more athletic guards in the NBA, shifty players like Kyrie who are fast, have a quick first step, tight handle, can get to their spots and with ease. Ja Morant, who plays above the rim, gets to the basket with burst, explosiveness. Those players are not whom I would trust Pods to guard at this stage of his career. He hasn't shown the ability to do it yet, and his physical tools aren't quite at that level at this point. But in terms of more off guards, players that are more perimeter oriented, like a Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, Jaylen Brown, those are some of the more elite shot creators at the two. Not to say that Pods can guard them right now, but those are players I'd be more comfortable with him looking at to guard over time because they're more perimeter oriented. So he can find ways to be physical, bump them off their spots, find different angles to make things tough on them, use his craft to make it, difficult, just like Alex Caruso has. Again, Alex Caruso came into the NBA as a very good defender, but he evolved. He got stronger. He understood assignments, tendencies, patterns, learned how to guard the best players and how they play, what their skill set is, and understanding the scouting report. All of these things can also improve your defense beyond just your athleticism. So there's other areas, and one thing in particular about Pods is his film study is actually a very, very important area of his overall makeup. He is someone that studies film. He rewatches tape, breaks down footage really, really well, understands where he can correct himself, his mistakes, and other players' mistakes. So him learning the league as he gets older, understanding scouting and tendencies, habits that players have in terms of, whether driving right, driving left, taking a pull-up, two dribbles at the elbow, turnarounds over either shoulder, like having a comfort in terms of guarding of different variety of players is absolutely essential, and that's something I expect him to continue to grow in. Now, as far as expectations go, I expect Brandin Podziemski to have a consistent role and minutes off the bench at point guard. While I do think it's a very good possibility he starts at the 2, I'm ultimately going to have to decide he will be the backup point. And the reason I say that is because he's not enough of a two-way player to start. And I think we need more positional size in the starting lineup. And so I think Melton starting at the 2 makes a lot more sense. And Pods filling in that backup playmaker and scoring role at the 1 for Steph makes more sense. Because losing Chris Paul, we don't really have a true backup point guard that we can look at. Buddy Hield and Melton have ball handling capabilities. They're able to put the ball in their hands and make something happen with it, but they're not necessarily proficient at creating their own shot or creating for others. They're not natural playmakers. So while they can make plays in a pinch, Pods is probably the best suited for the backup point guard role, and that's why I think that should be exactly what he plays. So replacing the Chris Paul impact that he had last year, being a well-rounded contributor. Again, we're not going to pigeonhole and label Pods into one or two roles. Like Pods, as much as you want to say he's a point guard or shooting guard, however you want to label him, the reality is he's a well-rounded player, and he's a combo. He can do many different things on the court, even beyond the guard role. He can do some things that even front court players excel at. And so I expect him to increase his volume behind the arc, take more threes. He mentioned 8 to 10 threes next year. I'm not sure. That sounds a little bit ambitious, sounds a little bit far-fetched, but I can see him taking 5 or 6 threes at least around there. And that increased volume is going to lead to increased defensive attention and more of a threat as a spacer and as a shooter. Being more efficient and taking different types of threes. Not only taking more, but making more. Being more efficient and taking different types, different looks off of screens, off of the movement that we like to run. Pull-ups, off the dribble, step backs. The variety will be there next year for Pods. He worked on many different, types of threes, and the variety this offseason has expanded. It's widened. And even off of handoffs, for example, those are things that we're going to see a little bit more of next season from Pods, and it's going to be absolutely critical that he can play that role where he can transition from playmaker to scorer back to playmaker. Having a player that's capable of that is very unique, and it's a clear positive, because if you're limited to just one area of the offensive end where you can only score, you can only create, then defenses can take away one or the other from you. But because Pods can transition between creator and scorer, I think that's a really good balance to have. So he can take the burden off of Steph, playing backup point guard minutes with the ball in his hands, making plays for others, and also taking shots of his own, like being aggressive as a scorer, looking for his shot, hunting for looks. Obviously, we don't want him to try to be the second or third leading scorer on the team. That's not the role we need him to play. We have Wiggins and JK for that. But what we can do is use him as an ancillary scorer, as an augment to the overall system, and a guy that can fill in the gaps and on a given night give us 15 to 20 points. It's very possible. Now, as I mentioned earlier, playmaking responsibilities, putting the ball in his hands more, elevating his assist to turnover ratio, being a more efficient playmaker, being a more efficient with the ball in his hands, controlling certain stretches of the game, understanding time and score, how to manage the clock. These are things that Pods didn't have enough reps in last year, but I think he's very capable of and can improve in. So leading a unit. He said he wants to be a leader. He believes he has leadership qualities. Well, he can lead an entire unit now. That's an opportunity that he might have. Playmaking responsibilities are absolutely essential, especially on this team when the entire offense, ball movement, player movement, the entire system is predicated on playmaking, making plays, screening, passing, moving. So with the ball in his hands more, I expect him to be better in all facets. Improved defensive discipline. One of the things Pods mentioned this offseason was how much of a better defender he is, or he feels he is, on the ball. He believes he's shown the ability to stay in front of his man, be more disciplined, be more reliable on the ball defensively at the point of attack. He believes he's capable of taking on some of the most tough matchups in the league. Now, while that may sound overzealous or may sound a little bit ambitious, I still believe he will improve on the defensive end regardless. I believe his discipline is going to improve, his understanding of scouting and tendencies, player patterns, how to scout properly, watching film, studying his opponents. All of these things are going to improve naturally next season. And just his general ability to stay in front of his man. He added some muscle, about 5 to 10 pounds of bulk in his upper body. So just using that strength to bump players off their spots and to leverage his physical, sturdy frame to make things tough is something that I expect him to do. And then he's a great rebounder for his size. Obviously, that's not expected to change. He's going to continue to rebound at a high level. He's going to continue to make a huge impact on both ends of the court, close defensive possessions, and even extend offensive ones as an offensive rebounder. Those are all things I expect from Pods. next year. Now, in terms of making winning plays, knowing his role, knowing not to play too much out of it. Now, obviously, there's a balance there. You want young players to feel empowered, like they can perform at a high level regardless of what they're doing on the court. But knowing his role, not playing too much outside of that is essential. And then on top of that, having a deep bag of intangibles, someone that's going to pick up deflections, dive for loose balls, tap out rebounds. These little things that don't show up on the stat sheet are going to be critical. They're going to be crucial in terms of the intangibles next year, because what they can do is they can create extra possessions, and extra possessions means more points. More points means more scoring, and it gives you a better chance to win. So ultimately with Pods, if he can create more possessions for us, then we're going to be in a better position to win games. That is why he led the team in plus minus last year. That is why he was a winning player when he was on the court last year, because he generated more opportunities for us to score. And general possessions, the team that has more possessions almost always wins. And then something that he mentioned in particular, competing for the most improved player award. Brandin Podziemski is aiming to be the most improved player next season. That is a goal of his. And so we're going to see what role he has, how many minutes he plays, what capacity he's in terms of trying to attain that. Obviously, he takes both ends of the court seriously. He doesn't take possessions off. And I expect him to continue that and his irrational confidence going into next year. While he does get criticized for having this irrational confidence and this brash nature of his, I still think it's something that's an asset, because it's better to have a player that believes in himself too much than to have a player that doesn't believe in himself enough. And the thing about Brandin Podziemski is he believes in himself a lot, and he believes that he can be a really good player in this league. He's shown it in his rookie season, netting all rookie first team honors. Very impressive, and he's the only player to have pulled that off for the Warriors in a while. And some of the records he broke as a rookie, some of the stats he accumulated, they were very, very impressive. So he already showed a very high floor last season, and I expect him to raise the ceiling and improve over time. But like I said, the irrational confidence is something that may rub people the wrong way, but ultimately it's a good thing. I'd rather have a player that believes in himself too much than not enough, and he does that. So he's going to play hard. He's going to play with the one-track mindset. He's going to try to make winning plays, and that is exactly what we need. Now, for my player projection, I have Pods playing 27.4 minutes per game. Last year, he was at 26.6, so I have him about a minute more. 13.8 points per game, 6.5 rebounds, 4.9 assists. So a well-rounded effort, well-rounded production from Pods. 1.1 steals, 0.3 blocks, on 46.3 from the field, 37.8 from three, and 71.4 at the line. I have all of his efficiency numbers going up, except for his three-point percentage. I have it going slightly down because I think his volume is going to go up, and with increased volume, efficiency naturally will decline, but not by much. So those are the projections I have, and then he will be a plus 236 overall. As of this recording, this is the highest plus minus I've predicted for any player. Draymond comes at second at around plus 212, I believe. So I have Pods again, before doing Steph now, at a plus 236 going into next year. He will have a major impact. Last season, he actually posted a plus 264. The reason I have it being a little bit less is because I think teams will have a thicker scouting report. They'll be more familiar with him. He can't catch them off guard and catch them by surprise as much next year. So they'll be more familiar with his game and be able to take things away. I think he'll hit some ups and downs. And ultimately, he's going to split his minutes up. So there's no way, even if he's playing more, that he's going to always be playing next to the best lineups, especially if he's not starting. Part of why his plus minus was as juiced up as it was last season. Yes, he contributed to it very, very, at a very high level. But at the same time, he played next to Steph Curry and Draymond Green. And when you play next to those two guys a lot, your plus minus tends to reflect that. So giving him his credit, but also understanding that if it's time for him to lead a unit, then we have to see it from him. And I think we'll see just that. Next season, I expect Brandin Podziemski to put up great numbers, but more importantly, huge impact. His impact will be immeasurable. And we're going to be winning when Pods is out there. Winning the game, winning the quarter, winning those minutes. And that's what we want to see. We want to see players that contribute to that don't take away from the others. And a well-balanced effort from Pods next year is improving in these areas. Shot creation, defense, playmaking, being more comfortable with the ball. So those are my expectations going into next season. Appreciate everybody for listening. This is the Brandin Podziemski player profile, and if you'd like to join the conversation, go to playback.tv/chasingwins and subscribe to the channel.